Hi, I'm John Pinard. I'm the CIO for Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, and I've been asked today to moderate for a wonderful topic about mitigating against alert fatigue, cutting through the noise with cyber AI that's being hosted by Darktrace. And joining me today, we have David Masson from Darktrace. We have Kalyan Chakravarthy from the region of Durham, also known as KC. And we have Ali Shahidi from Ontario Health. And so I'm just going to go through and ask each of you to talk a little bit about yourself and maybe talk about what alert fatigue means to you and how it may have affected your organization. So why don't we start with you, Ali?
Sure. Good afternoon. Good time. Well, from the introduction point, I am the Director of Enterprise Information Security Office at Ontario Health, and I have been basically with the provincial government and other government agencies and private sector for many years in this domain. So from the alert fatigue point of view, well, we are dealing with billions of events, as we know, and per day. And in one report actually that I had last month that I had to present to the board of directors at Ontario Health, we had over 80 billion basically alerts and events going through our systems within the just Ontario Health sister agencies within the government. So dealing with all of that is basically exhausting. And the reality is that we miss many of these alerts and events due to the fact that we don't have the needed power or resources to look into them all the time and make sure that they are correlated and they are really meaningful to that we can discover the incident. That's the point that the alerts are alerts, but at the end of the day, they are going to represent either become just a regular type of alerts or the incidents. So that's where the alert fatigues come in play, that we don't have the capability by humans' power. If we want to go in the traditional way, look into those alerts and come up with a meaningful story that whether there's something going on within our environments or not. So I'll pass it back to you, John.
That's good. That's exactly what this is all about. And KC, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and your experiences?
My name is Kalyan Chakravarthy, or I go by KC, like the KC and the Sunshine Band. I am the CIO for the region of Durham. And coming to alert fatigue, I think two simple things for me is like one is I don't want my resources to be spending time on something that is routine and mundane if it can be automated, because it's about the productivity. Like human resources are the most precious resources that we have. So we need to make sure that like when they are being put into work, they are doing some valuable work onto it. The second part of the things is like where, because of these routineness and whatever, like whether you do it through automation, you do it through from people or whatever process that we put in, I don't want to miss any alert and make it a bigger problem. And like something like alerts are there for a reason. There is a reason behind why you're alerted for something. And like most of the time, whether you call it false positive, you do any of those things. But I don't want to miss something important because it is clubbed in with a million other things. That is the whole point. Like those are the two key things, in my opinion, in this alert fatigue.
And that's exactly ties right into this. And one of the comments that David made this morning, which ties into what you were talking about, KC, is that we should be focusing on the business, not on the breach. And if you can have tools that can come to or be put in place to help deal with the breaches or eliminate the breaches, then it allows us to focus on the business. And so there's the whole world of cyber has become such a problem, and during the pandemic has been expanded on. And it's actually gotten to the point where we ran into some issues recently trying to get cyber insurance, that these insurance companies are now starting to either not cover people or they are dramatically increasing their rates. Our insurance company told us that the insurance industry is paying out $4 for every dollar that they bring in. And so, now it's no longer just a matter of we're going to pay somebody for cyber insurance. They're being demanding on the requirements of what needs to be in place to protect your organizations. And so to me, that's where organizations like Darktrace come in. And so David, why don't you talk a little bit about Darktrace and some of the wonderful things that the organization has to share with people?
John, it's interesting you bring up insurance. There's quite a few articles in the press just today about the issues you just raised. And I think it began with AXA in France about a month ago, where they just said, we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to cyber insure you anymore. So that's the end of it. For those who've got insurance, you're probably going to get one claim and then that'll probably be it for you. My name is Dave Masson, everybody. I'm a Director of Enterprise Security at Darktrace. I actually founded Darktrace in Canada back in 2016. And I've been riding that rocket ever since. My actual background is I spent most of my career in national security with first the British and then the Canadian governments. So the great news is I'm now a Canadian. Right, there we go. Looking at the scale of threat that we face, and Casey just picked up on one of the issues. Although the deficit in the number of qualified cybersecurity people that we can't get our hands on is part of the problem. It's not the major problem. The real problem is that, quite frankly, because of the way cyber's moving, there's too much of it. I'll be very quick here. There's too much of it. It's too sophisticated, and it's just getting increasingly sophisticated, and it's moving faster than human beings can think. So basically, security teams have been overwhelmed. Never mind about alert fatigue. They're overwhelmed by often the speed of the actual attacks. And if you could actually find that scarce human resource, and I do recall, I saw a statistic this year that showed that the number of vacancies versus the number of open vacancies versus the number of people available actually dropped this year for the first time in a long time. I'm actually going to say you can't actually throw more people at this subject. You just can't, because they can't deal with it anyway. So there's a bit of an asymmetry going on where all the cards need to be stacked in favor of the threat actor, but we advocate that if you use AI, you can actually put the advantage back in the hands of the defender and get the AI to do a lot of the heavy lift when it comes to this issue.
That's a great point, and I can tell you as well that I've been amazed at the number of job postings for cyber individuals. And there's an organization that I work with that has opened up, it's a recruiting firm that's opened up a completely separate arm for cybersecurity professionals. There's just that much demand for it. And I don't see it going away until, even with new tools and things coming out, there still has to be people that manage those tools. And in one of the comments you made in the opening this morning, David talked about that it's I forget what the exact mention that you had was talking about. Yeah, here, not replacing humans, it was supporting humans. And so the idea of Darktrace isn't to replace those cyber professionals, it's to give them the tools they need to do their job. Which
absolutely, yeah, because they're quite frankly overwhelmed. Obviously, we're going to talk about alert fatigue, but it's not a fair fight. I always say asymmetry is a fancy word for it's just not fair. And don't forget, not only the scarce resource, what they're actually trying to defend is becoming increasingly complex. Struggling to understand the complexity and speed of what they're trying to defend, never mind dealing with the speed and complexity of the threat they actually face. It's not fair.
No, absolutely. So, David, why don't we start out a little bit and have you talk about sort of the offerings from Darktrace? So if we kind of set the stage for people, and then we can talk about a couple of different scenarios.
Yeah, sure. For those who have not come across us before, we are a cyber AI company. And we're using artificial intelligence. Yes, I know very much that's a buzzword these days, but we've been doing this for a long, long time. Back in the days when it wasn't quite the buzzword. But we're using artificial intelligence to do three things. We're doing it to detect threat in digital infrastructure. We're using it to stop threat in digital infrastructure. And we're using it to then investigate that threat. And by the way, when you hear the word investigate, that's probably the biggest area where we're actually trying to augment the human being. We do by basically, actually, I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't use roles and signatures. We don't do threat intelligence. In fact, we don't care about the big bad world out there. And I'll tell you why, because you can't keep up with it. It's too much. too fast, too complex.
That's
But
right.
you know what? Even if you knew all the bad stuff right now, and you knew all of it, you had every signature you're ever going to need, in about 13 seconds, there'll be a new one, and one foot will come flying through your firewall. Never mind the fact that they don't even bother hacking through your firewall anymore. Even Hollywood doesn't bother with that. They're using social engineering to get inside the wall in the first place. So you can't keep up with it. We don't do that. We're using AI to effectively understand self of digital infrastructure. Self-learning AI that learns how everything is. The pattern of life, the sense of self of digital infrastructure, the sense of self of every device, of a human being, DNS server, subnet, blah, blah, etc., 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 right across your digital infrastructure. Whether it's on-prem, cloud, SaaS, email, Slack, Teams, Microsoft 365, and by the way, for those for the engineers out there who are watching this, including on your OT as well, same technology, same principles. That's what we're doing. And because the AI understands self, it understands when self changes, and it can then give you an assessment of how much of a change that is. Now, this is where we'll talk about false positives in a second, and that's how it works. It gives you a score, and quite clearly, if it's a score of 10 out of 100, probably not that interesting, really. If it's 90 out of 100, I'd be getting on it like now, as fast as you can. Because the whole idea about this is to catch threat in real time, not after it's happened, while it's happening. And if you do that, you don't get hacked in the first place. And then we use AI to stop threat, and the AI can stop threat because if it understands the normal pattern of life of a device, it can enforce that pattern of life once it's changed. That's how we basically stop threat. On the investigation side, what we've done is automated the investigative and triage function of cyber analysts. Everybody calm down. I repeat, this is about supporting that scarce cyber analyst and basically doing all the heavy lift of the other things that would actually take up all their time and all that mole whacking they would have to do. Does it in seconds, investigates it for you, gives you delivery, and actually frees up your scarce human resource to actually engage in some quality work, which is what you've really employed them to do. There you go.
And so you talked this morning, David, a little bit about what I believe you coined as smart assessment. And it was referring to that you don't look in a rearview mirror, and that you have other methods of building this AI solution or method to protection.
Yeah, that's what most security products do. You're in the vehicle, you're going forward, but you're always looking in the rear view mirror. You're looking at what has happened, not what is happening. You're learning about what has occurred. And sometimes you can use that based on past experience to try and work out what you think the threat actors are going to do next. But you know what? It's a guess. It's a very intuitive guess. And by the way, you can use AI to help you make that guess. But my experience is threat actors don't tend to do what you think they're going to do in the future. So it's a bit of a waste of time. No, using AI here is about understanding what's happening now and dealing with it now and investigating it now, and you don't get hacked. We spoke this morning about ransomware, and there are lots of solutions about ransomware. There's lots of advice about how to deal with ransomware. My advice would be don't get hacked in the first place, right? Ransomware is a hack. That's what it is. Just don't have a technology that can see it the minute it arrives, the microsecond it arrives, and stop it as quickly as you can. Don't get hacked in the first place.
No, that's great. Ali, you had talked during your intro about these, I think you said somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 million alerts.
80 billion, actually.
80 billion. That's even worse. And so I'm curious, and I'll ask you, and then I'm going to ask David to respond, but how do you go about even dealing with that? I mean, to me, this is where we get to what I refer to as crying wolf, that you get so many alerts that you just, at some point you go, yeah, you know what? None of them are of any use. And you just kind of throw them all out. So what has Ontario Health done as far as being able to even address that kind of volume?
Well, that's the reality of the problem that we are dealing with. And no matter how many staff, or even we have monitoring stock operations, basically monitoring all of that. But the reality is that the again, old-fashioned, I call the same solutions old-fashioned concepts, are no longer able to basically keep up with all of these events and logs. And the reality is that the automation is the key here. And if we don't have any type of AI that would be able to capture, because we studied that malware and basic protections are not able to capture any of this. Let's say ransomware that we are talking about here. We have had few of them actually, and we have tried to, but we have been lucky by having basically AI solutions in place, kind of, they've been able to capture them. At the same time, we do know that the visibility to the overall environment might be not 100%. And so at the end of the day, it's a combination of as David mentioned, it's not just replacing the human being, it's automating and making that faster and more precise, basically detection of the problem off the hand right away before it goes further. We actually had a very simple one, it was 2 weeks ago that we dealt with, and our AI solution basically was able to just catch it right on the fly, before it gets out of control and out of hand. So that's how we are dealing with it. Are we doing it 100%? Definitely not. There are always room for improvements. And as David mentioned, it's an ever-changing type of deal we have, and the attacks that we are dealing with. And they are becoming more sophisticated. No matter what we put in place for protection of the environments and what we are doing, tomorrow it's going to be obsolete. So we need to be on top of that. And the machine learning, as David mentioned, is the key here, that it can be based on the behavioral analysis rather than correlating in. As I said, I don't say that the SIMs are bad, but they are not able to answer the need anymore.
And so, David, I can't believe this would be the first time that you've heard this kind of story. So how has Darktrace been able to help organizations like Ontario Health in combating the 80 billion alerts that they get to determine which are the ones that are actually valid and coming up with ways to be able to address those?
Yeah, I feel your pain, Ali. It's one of the reasons we first came up with this, trying to use AI as a solution way back in 2012. It was the same issue then, too sophisticated, too fast, too much. And we decided, is there some way we can actually support human beings here and give them a chance to fight, and decided we use AI. What AI does is, it will tell you all about, it's going to see change, all right? It's going to see change. Now, the big question is, and let's bring in false positives now, before somebody else brings it up. Is all change threat? No. But all threat will be a change. And that threat will manifest itself in the scale of the change, okay? And that's why when we show alerts, we give them a score between 1 and 100. And the higher that score, the more deserving of your attention right now. Deal with it, you don't get hacked. That's basically how Darktrace works. But even with that, you can still get a lot of alerts. So someone like Ontario Public Health, where you're actually getting hammered all the time, as well as masses of false positives, you're getting masses of really bad positive positives at the same time, which your SOC team's probably struggling to then triage and say, like, we've got 100 really bad issues right now. Which one are we going to deal with first? That's where your AI comes in, because it can think much, much, much faster than human beings. It can deal with the change that's happening. And by the way, when change happens on networks, when cyber comes in, it's not one change, it's continuous change, okay? The AI can handle that, and it can then itself start triaging it for you. And our cyber AI analyst product, which by the way, folks, is based on supervised machine learning, not the unsupervised we use to detect threat. What that effectively did was we pointed, this is where we actually used the training data set. So you hear me going about how we're not interested in artificial intelligence feeds and rows and signatures. This was an occasion where we actually did use a training data set. The training data set was 100 of our analysts. We've got some really, really good analysts. I'll give you some top tips on who to recruit, by the way, later on. Musicians, great people to recruit if you want a good cyber analyst. Anyway, we pointed the AI at 100 of our analysts for years. It was 3.5 years the first time, but it's an ongoing thing. And basically, it just sat and learned how they investigated, how they prioritized, how they built their hypotheses, how they triaged what they were doing, every mouse click, every drop-down menu, every visit to virus total, and so on and so forth. And from that, we were then able to automate that function. So even when you've got a huge barrage of positive alerts that have come in, alerts with high scores, the AI can then look at it. And because the AI understands the self of your entire digital infrastructure everywhere, it's literally investigating all the time. It's pulling threads and small breadcrumbs of issues from all over the place together, putting it together in a comprehensive human narrative for you. That AI, the analyst, will then be able to crunch. I've seen 1,246 alerts crunched down to 2 reported incidents. Okay, they were all in some way connected, crunched down to fully reported incidents with all the information you need to see: who did what, where and when, how, who got infected, who was reaching out, where the C&C was, the different stages of the attack. If you like to follow the MITRE attack frame, it's all put out that way. And it's done like that. But to come on to what KC was saying earlier on, this isn't about getting rid of everybody. This is then freeing up your team. Rather than being overwhelmed with what we're going to do next, they can now go, right, now we know what we're going to do and who's going to do it and what our priorities are going to be. That's the benefit of using AI, not just used in the heavy lift of actually finding the threat, the heavy lift of actually the whole configuration, the whole issue.
And that's exactly it, is that it takes you away from having to deal with 80 billion threats and actually lets you focus on the ones that you really need to be looking at. So KC, let's talk a little bit about the region of Durham. And I can't imagine that you have gone unscathed without having issues with threats and so forth. So why don't we talk a little bit about maybe some issues that you guys have run into and how you're going about protecting yourselves?
I think we are no different than like anybody else. Like I think all of us, like where we live and breathe this, and like some with a smaller scale, some with a larger scale, and like we all have the same set of problems. But I think there is no one single solution to this. There's no silver bullet to say, okay, you put this and then like you go to bed and like, okay, done. Like if there is anything that product, that company or whatever that will be making billions and billions, that will be the only company that will exist in the world right now. But it is about like for us from our side, it's about looking at the process, because the alerts come from different places. Like it is not one single place that they emerge, and it is, and like at various levels as well, right? Like while some can be from and I'm not talking just about even from a cyber perspective. It can be at an application level, it can be at an infrastructure. And like when you go into the details of the infrastructure, there are various levels of infrastructure that you have and various types of infrastructure that you have. So it's about like, first is about like when you have an ever-changing landscape, the first thing, this is my opinion, the first thing is always like, you need to know what you have. It is about like knowing what you have is very important to attack, like if to understand what is happening to you. I think that is where we have invested on like basic. I think where people talk about a lot about the artificial intelligence, like getting that one. Those are all the next steps, in my opinion. First, you have to know what you have, get your foundations right, know what you have. And from that, build a good governance structure to really talk about roles and responsibilities and like who is doing what. And then you take each of the role responsibility and say, how can you automate this particular one? Because I always believe the biggest precious things that are there are the human resources, like because that is where we'll get in a trained resource, a good trained, skillful resource is the biggest one that like we won't be finding in future. Like, and John, you talked about like where companies are starting their own cyber security, like just for the recruitment purposes, so that you know that like that is important. So first identifying, going from the foundation, knowing what you have, having a governance structure, having the roles and responsibilities, and identifying what can be automated and what cannot be not. Not everything, like AI is not here to solve all the problem. And like I say this with utmost respect, because I teach AI at Durham College. So I am a big proponent. So don't take me as that naysayer to say, okay, I don't want that AI. I love it. I love like, and that is where like even at this, where I went and learned to really reskill myself. But it is about like, we need to understand what can be done and what can't be. There are certain areas where AI can help. And there are certain areas where we want people to help us. there is that real intelligence that needs to be there. So identifying that and then having a plan to really go from X to Y in a roadmap is what we are doing. And like, we're still at a very early stage. We are not one of the best in the world, but I can definitely say that like we have one of the greatest in the sound foundational plan that we have to know what we have, what are the things that we have to do, and where we have to go.
And I think you made a really good point too when you were talking about, you have to know what you have, and I mean that's as IT organizations move along in their career or their lifespan, more and more technology comes in, and the stuff that's been around for years you kind of forget about, and that's part of the problem. Is those are potentially where the holes come in, because it becomes older technology, it's not properly patched, and so yeah, you make a great point that you need to make sure you know what you have in order to be able to protect it. So David, you talked a bit this morning about change in normality, which I thought was an interesting phrase, that talked about, I think this was about how Darktrace manages to protect, is to seeing changes in normality and recognizing that that's, the data shouldn't be coming in. You want to talk a little bit about that and some of the interesting ways that Darktrace can protect your environment?
That's our core technology, using KC, using unsupervised machine learning. By importing basically all the raw network traffic from your digital infrastructure, all your metadata, all the rest of it. By the way, we're not interested in the actual data in the payload, believe it or not. We take measurements from around each packet, hundreds of them. But very, very accurate mathematical models, which then allow the AI to, remember folks, it's artificial intelligence. Can we just all remember that? There is no Skynet, all right? So it's artificial intelligence. Allows it to understand the pattern of life and then see change that pattern of. And that is the core function of how Darktrace works. What comes with it, and just picking up what KC was saying here, is basically visibility. It will actually then give you, and by the way, we visualize it on a screen. You actually see the thing live in front of you. What you actually get probably for the first time is a chance to actually see what you've got. If it's got an IP address, it's going to be there. You will see it. And pretty much every time we install in a network, we find it varies. It's varied over the years, sometimes as much as 35%, sometimes down to 5%, but we always show way more connected devices than people actually thought they had. And what that's actually saying is organizations don't know what they've got. They really don't know what they've got.
Yep.
And so if you can't identify it, you can't protect it. And this has really come to the fore recently with a lot of these ransomware attacks, the ones where it's double extortion ransomware, where it turns out they've been on there for a month and nobody saw it at all. Nobody saw them at all. Nobody saw them stealing the data. So remember Equifax? The biographical details on 143 million Americans walked out off the network and nobody saw it. Okay, and that's a real problem. But if you think about it, if you've built your digital infrastructure, it should be like the back of your hand. It should be like your home. You really know it and you know where everything is. When burglars break into your home, they're frightened because they've never been there before and they don't know where everything is and they don't know where they're going to go. But in cyber, it's the other way around. We've no idea what we've got and where it is. The threat actors know it. I know they can get in there and wander around and nobody's actually going to see them. But if you use AI technology that actually maps literally everything, you will see everything. And that's why you will see change in real time. You will see those guys landing on your network and trying to move around, because quite simply, they cannot be of the pattern of life of anything that exists there, because it's going to be absolutely brand new. They've never been there before, never moved around. This device has never sent SMB share requests in this way before. This device has never port scanned before. In actual fact, why is the receptionist port scanning? He shouldn't even know how to do a port scan in the first place, but somehow suddenly managed to do it. AI will show you that. Will show you that change that we talk, change to normality. And the other thing I want to emphasize here is normality is different for everybody. This is another reason why we don't want to use threat intelligence and rules and signatures, because one organization really is not like the next one, is not like the next one, is not like the next one. What you've learned in one place is of really no benefit to you when you try to learn about this new place, because all you'll do is get it wrong. You'll try and find what was wrong at the other place. The AI doesn't do that. It just accepts how you are as the way you are, for good or bad. Bear in mind, those are human concepts. The AI doesn't recognize those. And that's really important for people to understand, because they're all completely different. So the solution that the AI will bring to you will be different compared to another organization.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that these threat actors, they don't care who they're attacking. They will, in some cases, they will target, but you get, you've got Colonial Pipeline, you've got Verizon, you've got Life Labs that occurred a couple of years ago. There was one that I read the other day that was it was called York Animal Hospital, right? Small little animal hospital that got hit with an $80,000 ransomware.
Yeah, no, it's that type of ransom is really, really insidious. I actually remember a dog's home out in Sherbrooke, Quebec, getting hit with ransomware years ago. But the reason they do that is because they know that, guys like you, KC in municipalities, guys like you, Ali, in healthcare, they know that you're driven by a sense of duty to maintain and provide a service. And so they hit you and others like you because they're kind of hoping that you'll think the quickest way of maintaining and getting that service back online again is to pay the ransom. That's why they do it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, and you get some of these smaller organizations that get hit, it actually can shut their doors because they don't have a means to be able to, they're not doing proper backups. They're not, putting systems like Darktrace in. And when they get hit by a ransom, they can't afford to pay it. And but it's like I said, it's the whole gamut of the scale that's being attacked. So I'd like to put a little scenario out for you, David, if I may. And so we'll talk about, and I've arbitrarily picked the power facility. So there's a power company that's determined that it's like Ali, where they're getting 80 billion alerts a year, and that they can't manage it, and that they need to put something in place. So what would you suggest as a means to go through the process of implementing something like Darktrace, and what it would require from a company standpoint, both from an implementation, education, and on-site or ongoing support process?
Okay, given that it's a power company, I'm going to talk about IT and OT. Everybody's
yes.
okay with that, because obviously they've got a lot of OT, which they probably think is air gapped, but I'm telling you now, it won't be anymore, okay? It will be connected to the internet and will be as vulnerable as the other place. In fact, it will be more vulnerable because, as you all know, much OT was never designed with security in mind. And the guy who invented the protocol that you're using isn't even on the planet anymore. But anyway, so with an organization like that, you want to, if you put in Darktrace, we do it right across the IT and OT. So basically, you're taking a unified approach to the AI. You're going to make sure that you're actually covering everything. Because believe it or not, the attacks that land in your OT may begin in your IT. It is possible for the breadcrumbs of an IT attack to have begun in OT and then spread over to IT. So you're taking a unified view in the way that the threat actors take a unified view of you when you attack. So basically, we're going to plug it in. And believe it or not, there is no configuration period. I don't know if anybody here has ever configured a SIM. We don't have any of that sort of issue. Basically, the trickiest bit is making sure we get all that raw network traffic, be it from the OT side or the IT side, and all the parts we're going to cover for you. And by the way, we'll only cover the parts that you want us to cover, whether that's all of it. Sometimes people say, I don't want you to do this, but I don't want you to do that bit. Fine, okay, whatever. And we're basically importing all that raw network traffic in, and basically we're port mirroring it onto the AI for analysis. So it's not in line. We do not touch your network. And believe it or not, we began in the OT space, and that is why we do not touch your network. For the OT people out there, I'm sure you know, you don't want anyone ever to touch your OT network because it's so fragile, it might go boo and fall over and break. So where it's passive, we're doing this all passively, getting the traffic on to build those mathematical models and then learn the pattern of life. That's it in, that's when it's in, that's when it's doing its thing. If you're really, really paranoid about the fact that you think you've now linked your OT with your IT because it's a power company, we'll keep them separate, it doesn't matter. Or you can bring it in a unified view and you can see both systems working together, it doesn't matter. It's got an IP address, we'll be showing you whatever it is and how people are interacting with the network. And that's what you want to see. You want to see people interacting with the network, because guess what, where the threat's probably going to come from? It's people, unfortunately. So we put it in, set it in, and then it sits there and it starts doing its thing, learns normal, and starts saying, you know what, this isn't normal. This is different from normal. That's a bit of a change. This has never happened before. He's never been to that IP address before, and so on and so forth. That's quite simply how it works. That's how it would do it. And then that's when we take it forward.
And so are there any hurdles that you can suggest that people might want to watch out for? And this isn't specifically from a power facility, but from anyone in implementing something like Darktrace.
You've got to give us the traffic. When I say us, by the way, there is no us. You often hear people, I mean, doctor, you hear say we, there's no we. Okay, it's just the AI that we've given you. We need the traffic, got to get the traffic in. If we don't have the traffic, can't see it. So that's part of the architecture, to make sure we get all that in there. Other hurdles, I'm talking like this as though AI is the easiest thing in the world. In many ways, we've designed it so that it's as easy to use or as difficult to use. An analyst straight off the course with 4 hours training will get value out of the product. If you're a double PhD mathematician, you can dive in there and spend hours in it. It's everything in between, because that's the world we live in. Not everybody's at the same level, and the same level of experience or whatever. But you will need some training. You will need to get used to it. You will have to get used to AI. I can't remember if I said this morning or earlier in the meeting here. AI making judgments on your behalf about what is worth alerting you to. Mm-hmm. For some people, that's a bit of a leap. And if you're using our autonomous response, you're going to have to get used to, and for some people it's difficult, the AI taking action on your network without your involvement and stopping threat. By the way, that our autonomous response, fully customizable. You can decide which bits you wanted to stop things on and when and where and all the rest of it. And we often, well, we do encourage people to begin it in what we call human confirmation mode, which is where it basically says, hey, I found this. This is what I'll do to stop it. Are you okay with it? Yes or no? And you can say yes or no.
And that's what I was going to ask is, do you have the ability to start out in yes, I'll call it intervention mode, and then flip it over to autonomous once you're comfortable with it?
Yes, we do. And we always designed it that way because of those reasons I just said. People, you know, this is AI doing it all for you, right? No human involvement. In human confirmation mode, and that's the way most people do it. It takes, for some organizations, it's about 6 weeks to 2 months before they get comfortable with it. And then it's up to them to decide where they'd like to deploy that technology. Obviously, on OT, people are a bit reluctant to have AI then stopping things in OT. You can do it. It's very, very surgical. You can do it. There's a bit more hesitancy there. But here's an interesting thing about for those for the OT people out there. I can tell you of instances where we found threat in PLCs. It's not a great threat, you know, the odd bit of scanning. It's genuine infections that have been found. But because the AI can monitor it so effectively and see any change to the threat that's been posed, they're actually able to leave the PLCs in and not stop production, because they're going to have to wait a year or two before somebody comes up with a new version of the PLC so they can swap them out. You can actually leave threat in place in OT, but the AI will monitor it to make sure it's not getting any worse.
Wow, that's very impressive. So we've had a couple of questions come up in the chat that I'd like to throw out. One of them is asking you if you can comment on the weaponization of AI, and can bad actors use AI to trigger attacks?
Okay, I was going to leave, that's a great question, but I was going to leave this towards the end, because otherwise, given my Scottish accent, I sound like Mr. Doom. So we've been using AI to protect networks for many, many years now, but what is definitely coming down the pipeline is offensive AI. This is where threat actors themselves will use AI to achieve their ends. And this is quite terrifying, to be honest with you. One of the reasons you can catch threat actors is, guess what? There's a human being at the end of the keyboard and at the end of the mouse, and they make mistakes. The human being's driving it. But this is where there won't be a human being attacking you. This will be algorithms attacking you, or in our case, algorithms fighting our algorithms. And we've seen it happen. We haven't seen full-blown AI attacks. We've seen bits, highly automated parts of attacks that clearly were an algorithm, and we won't stop it. But this is algorithms fighting human beings now, where the AI itself will decide how it's going to land and what it's going to do and when it's going to move and where it's going to move to and what it's going to, etc., with no human involvement at all. And you may never even know you've been attacked. You might never know, depending on what they're doing. And it will decide how it's going to leave as well. Imagine AI that lands in your Outlook and it just sits there for a couple of weeks learning exactly how you use your Outlook, how you use your email, and is able to entirely imitate you or your partner or your major vendors or whatever, and then basically start sending you emails that are utterly convincing because, yeah, that's my wife. Yeah. And that really is a photograph of my daughter. And she really was skiing this morning. Yeah, of course it is, because it scraped it off the Facebook page and knows this is the right time to send it to you because you're going to click on it and bingo and all hell breaks loose. So yes, unfortunately, we are going to be able to look forward to threat actors using AI. And I know I would say this, but it's true. At that point, you cannot bring human beings to an AI fight because they're just not going to win.
As you were talking about that, all I could picture was AI wars. And you know, some of these sci-fi movies that yeah, it's quite scary. And at that point, that's when you start looking at moving off the grid.
No, you're getting it wrong, John. At that point, that's when you start using AI to fight them, and you will win.
Absolutely. So, talking about cyber AI, who bears the responsibility or the liability in the event of cyber AI missing a threat?
Okay, well, I'm going to say cyber AI won't miss the threat. It will see that change. The issue here is whether the human being sees it or not or deals with it, whether they recognize the alert score and acted upon it. That's one of the reasons we came up with Anti-GINA. Sorry, that's our autonomous response technology that will actually stop the threat. It only stops the change, folks. It will stop the line of code or whatever's actually happening. The printer will keep printing, the computer will keep computing, the lights will keep on, the HVAC will keep working. And one reason we came up with that because it gives the human beings a chance to get, you know what, I don't need to deal with this immediate issue now because it's been stopped. I can take a deep breath and have a think and actually look what other alerts happened at that time, or clicking on our cyber AI analyst, allow it to do the investigation for you and deliver the results of what it's got. And then your time to meaning of what's happened gets reduced very, very quickly. And it gives you a chance to take a breathe and actually work out what's going on. In most cases, did somebody say the word tool earlier on? We prefer the word solution. The thing about a solution and a tool is you've got to use it.
Yes.
If you don't use it, then things will go wrong.
So I'm going to bring us back a little bit back into reality because hopefully we won't have to deal with AI wars for some time to come. I'm going to bring another scenario. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, actually, John, this will be soon. It's not going to be for some time to come. It will be soon.
Okay, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that everybody can put a cyber AI solution in place to ward that off, or all that we care about.
John, my apologies. May I ask a question from David?
Absolutely.
Yes. From Darktrace basically point of view, functionality, at what stage of kill chain you are going to detect the actual the threat or the malicious type of activities going on when you're doing from that? If you can describe it at what stage you would be able to discover it, that would be, I think, helpful.
There's a few kill chains out there right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, when they land, or the insider, we haven't spoken about insiders, I think we're doing that tomorrow, or when the insider starts deviating from their normal pattern of life and starts something else, right at the beginning. As soon as that change has occurred, that's where we'll see it. And then we'll see it through the other stages of the life cycle that's there. By the way, with our cyber AI analyst, the automated triage and investigative function, we'll actually give you the kill chain. We'll give you a kill chain readout at the same time of when it's happened. But no, right at the beginning. As I said, I think at the beginning of this chat, the whole idea is you don't get hacked. The idea is not to end up further down the kill chain.
That's great. That's yeah.
But bear in mind, the AI may have told you right at the beginning, but it's up to you to pay attention to it. You may eventually pay attention to it when it's come further down the kill chain, but if you look back, you'll see, boom, it had you right at the beginning.
Which in that case, actually, it requires, as Casey mentioned, that we do need to have other controls in place to get actually the logs and everything, all the way from the endpoint to the network edge and everything, in order for AI to be able to detect that. If you don't have other type of controls in place, then the AI on its own won't be able to detect it in the first place. Even we are talking about that telemetry is the key factor here on the visibility of the environment, as we discussed. So we do need that, to have those. We shouldn't have a misperception of the AI that is going to be the ultimate solution for security and defense in depth. So we do need the additional layers of defense in place in order to AI to be able to capture it.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate anybody to get rid of their firewall, because it's going to keep somewhere between 60–90% of the complete and utter rubbish that's floating around the internet off your network. You need to hang on to that. But what you've got to accept is things are going to get in. It's going to happen. If they're not already there, it is going to happen, and you need something behind that firewall that will find it as quickly as possible and deal with it.
Right.
And as KC said earlier as well, it's also about making sure you know what you have, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to protect what you don't know you have.
Exactly. So
let's quickly talk a little bit about a second scenario. And this is one that's near and dear to my heart, because I actually lived through this. I worked at an organization where there was a ransomware email came into our accounts payable department. And it was simply, please pay the attached invoice immediately. Somebody double clicked on the attachment, and lo and behold, before she knew it, it had encrypted her entire computer and went on to any network shares that were attached to her computer. And I mean, this was an organization that had 14,000 employees and over 2,500 users. And we literally pulled the plug on the internet to prevent it from getting any worse than it was. We had some, I'll call it backdoor solutions as to how we managed to get back from that. It was, I guess one of the saving graces is it was on a Monday morning. So we had our backups from the weekend. And as I had said to you earlier, David, this was before the days of them putting bots in that would wait for 31 days before they unleashed it, because they wait for, because they know a lot of organizations keep backups for 30 days. So how would something like Darktrace have helped to save us at that point, so that we didn't have to live through the ransomware hell?
We stopped an attack like that way back in 2016 when we first actually brought our autonomous response, and it was exactly the same situation. This was a charity in the west coast of America. Mm-hmm. I'm being cagey here because I can't remember if we've got permission to say their name or not, but anyway.
Yeah, it's okay. We don't need names.
Anyway, and it was exactly that. It was the receptionist. Curiously, the receptionist received the invoice, not goods payable. It was the receptionist, and of course, it was using language which encouraged, developing a sense of urgency, and you need to deal with it right now. And the receptionist did click on the actual invoice, and of course, saw an invoice, and then emailed it off to someone else. But what they didn't realize was straight away there was a whole load of grief landed on her computer, as well as starting to encrypt her own hard drive straight away. It was blasting off SMB shares and writes all over the place and encrypting things as fast as possible. And also a bit of C2 going on, telling the bad guys, hey, we've had a hit. Somebody's been stupid enough to click on that rubbish email we sent out. A bit of C2 kicking off at the same time. Darktrace lit up like a Christmas tree the minute it ignited and hit it with an alert. I think it was about 40% straight off. And that alert just got higher and higher and higher and higher in microseconds. I think it was up to like 95 within about a second and a half. Unfortunately, they didn't have autonomous response technology at that time, which would have just stopped it. It would have just killed the communications. It either told the firewall to do it, or sent some TCP resets and just killed the communication. You might have you would have lost a bit of the hard drive on her device, but nothing else. Those SMB shares would never have happened. We just killed it stone dead. Unfortunately, they didn't have autonomous response at that time. But the alerts that we were pumping out, were really blazing away. There was trumpets blaring and all the rest of it, which meant that they were able to then pull plugs as fast as they could in other parts of the organization actually to stop it getting any worse. And I think they lost a bit of stuff, unfortunately. But that's how Darktrace would alert to it. When it comes to the autonomous response part that I just mentioned there, I'll give I think actually, John, you brought it up earlier on. When WannaCry landed in 2017 and it hit the British National Health Service back in the UK, on the parts of the health service that we protected at that time, lit up like a Christmas tree. And in those parts that had our autonomous response, we stopped it within 7 seconds. Bang. Wow. That was it. Just dead. Stopped it. We don't clean it up, but we stopped it, bang, as quickly as possible, which then allowed people to go and then start thinking, okay, what are we going to do next? What do we need to do? How are we going to clean this up in such a way as it doesn't get worse, etc., etc., etc. Now, that's good old-fashioned smash and grab ransomware that you suffered from. Of course, your more sophisticated guys are on there for, 30 days, looking around before they actually detonate the ransomware. And of course, at the same time, because they realize you've got backups, you might rebuild it, they steal your data. And by the way, increasingly, they're looking for really sensitive data. So if you've ever done anything stupid with photographs on your network, pray you don't get ransom, because somebody's going to steal that and then blackmail you, for want of a better word. But that's how Darktrace would protect. We'd protect and detect from it, and then actually stop it in an autonomous response facility.
Good. So we talked a little bit about false positives before. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, and this goes back to Ali's talk earlier about the mass volumes of alerts. So how does Darktrace go about eliminating, I guess, false positives?
Well, I know I would say this, but I'm going to say it. There are no false positives with Darktrace. Every change that it alerts to is a genuine change from the observed pattern of life of whatever that device or human being is. The question is always how much of a change, and the bigger the change, the bigger the score. And that's basically saying to you, do you know what? You probably do want to look at this right here and now. So score 10, 20, maybe not so much, but definitely 16 above, you do want to be paying attention to it. By the way, those low scores that you're ignoring, if that change continues, it's not going to alert once. It keeps doing it, and it keeps revising its thoughts and opinions about what this change has done. So that score might get higher. That's how it deals with false positives, or false positive would be the right word here. But at the same time, layered on top, you can actually ask the AI to do a full investigation. You ask the AI to look at all these alerts, regardless of the score, and then it will actually work out which ones are related, which ones are knitted together, boom, pull it together and give you the full report on what's happened, like I said before, who did what, or what did what, where and when, why, what got effective, what's been going on, with some advice, like you might want to look into this in there. And by the way, you can print it off in any language you like, because we use the AI to translate it into lots of different languages. And in many ways, that helps you with the triage function. Okay, because you might get up in the morning, you get 30 alerts in the in tray, and you haven't got time to deal with it. You can either actually decide what your threat appetite is. We have a thing called the threat slider, because you might say, I'm only interested in anything above 70%. Won't a lot of the alerts will disappear. Or you can press on the cyber analyst, and it will crunch and investigate them, and it probably reduce them down to about 3 or 4 fully investigated incidents. And that's why we came out with this, because as we said before, with when Ali was mentioned about the billions of alerts that they get, human beings just can't deal with that, can't mask that information, can't then prioritize. You allow an AI to do that for you. So
you've talked about changes in normality. So is there a bit of what I would classify as a learning curve, so that people, the AI would have to determine what normal is in order to be able to determine if there is a change to normality?
Yeah, absolutely. We do proofs of value. Most people call them proofs of concept, where you get us free for 30 days and try us out. For that, we usually leave the AI in. By the way, it's plug and play. If you're on-prem, we just literally stick something in the rack, copper or cable, chunk, and off we go. That's it. That's the configuration. That's it. We leave it in for like a working week and a weekend, so like 10 days. So you've got some rich context by the time we actually fire it up, show it up, and let you see what your network looks like. And then pretty much after that, the longer it's in, the better it is. It's like fine wine or cheese. And the longer in, the better it is. But bearing in mind, of course, no network's static. Change is constant. But this is AI that's accepting change. But when it sees change, it's looking at what else is going on around the network. It's looking at like-minded devices, like-minded users, like-minded subnets, comparing and contrasting all the time before it then just says, hey, there's a change. It's a complete change. It's 100%. No, it doesn't do that. It's constantly thinking about it, and it's reassessing the score it's going to give to that change. And then you will have situations where, I don't know, company suddenly sells off half the company, and it'll go, hey, wait a minute, half the people have disappeared. You probably get an alert on that. And you'll say, yeah, I know why that is, because we've just sold off half the company. But when it does give you that alert, it will actually point out to you the bits that you've been left behind. And maybe it wasn't quite the tidy break that you thought it was, but the AI will be able to show you all that.
I guess one of the things that was going through my head when we were talking about this is kind of like the credit card companies, where they used to call you saying that there's been some abnormal spending, that it would be a similar scenario, that the AI is going through looking at what your normal spending habits are, and all of a sudden, if you've gone out and bought yourself a new car on your credit card, that it would be a little odd.
Well, yeah, I'd like to think most people might have noticed a lot of those type of things don't seem to happen so much anymore. They used to be quite prevalent. And guess what? That's maturity of the AI in that particular part of the world, where it's beginning to realize it's actually doing a bigger assessment. It's not just looking at your credit card purchases in isolation as one way compared to the last one. It's actually being a bit more nuanced and understanding what's going on, and those alerts tend to have gone down a bit. It's the same with unsupervised machine learning. It's not just saying this device in isolation at this point in time based on what's happened. It's looking at what's going on around it, as I say, in its peer group or whatever, and comparing it quite literally against the entire digital infrastructure within which it exists.
Good. So we're getting close to the end of time. I'm just going to ask Ali and KC if they have any other questions that they'd like to ask. And then David, I'll give you a minute to throw anything out that I haven't asked already that you'd like to make sure people are aware of. Ali?
Sure, thanks, Sean. So the only quick question I'm going to have, I know we are at the time actually. In a complex environment, David, let's say that we are in a multi-operation type of models that we have. How would this AI would be able to basically come up with the proper use cases for each local location or local entity that are sharing the data and looking to the logs? So how would it be able to manage all the use cases specific to the local side? But that's a challenge that we are dealing with. And again, it needs to be insight to make the threat hunting type of thing available to the environment.
Yeah, you can use this for threat hunting if you want to. In terms of use cases, we've got a lot of use cases in the first place. The great thing about the AI with our AI is we produce our alerts through models. So for those who are not aware of what I'm talking about here is we might show an alert that says, a hard drive has been encrypted. Well, that's ransomware. But then we'll give you a model that will just say it's ransomware rather than just saying a hard drive has been encrypted. But when it comes to, if you think you've got very unique use cases or very unique infrastructure, you can edit the models, or you can write your own models based on what the AI is telling you. Absolutely, because remember I said earlier on, every organization is different. And within the organizations, the different parts could be often very radically different throughout the infrastructure.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
KC, any last words from you?
No, nothing. Like as I said, like there is all I want people to remind that, like, okay, there is no one silver bullet. Like I think having that awareness, spread the awareness, people is the best part of it. So make sure that like you have a great training on this to not just your IT people, but like to all the employees. And have have that visibility, what like David has talked about, and then identify where you have to put in these kind of tools and make the best out of it.
Wonderful, thank you. And David, last words from you. Okay,
my last words were originally going to be stand by for offensive AI, but we've spoken about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to finish on a slightly a doomy bit about the threat. And it's something that was quite popular a few years ago and then got a bit quiet. And I think that's because of COVID-19. But don't forget, folks, 5G is coming down the pipe. And if you think things are fast now, just you wait to see 5G turbocharge absolutely everything. Now, it's going to make the world a lot better place for all of us. But as always, the technology, it's a double-edged sword. And it will also turbocharge cyber threat at the same time. So if your human teams are struggling now, they're going to struggle when they're facing AI threats. They're really going to struggle once things are turbocharged by 5G. And that's why we advocate using AI to do the heavy lift for the human beings and give them a bit of a hand.
And don't forget the quantum computing, David.
That's right. Somebody said to me the other day, that'll ruin all encryption. I said, yeah, but don't worry, we'll just come up with quantum encryption.
So I'd like to take this chance to thank David Masson and the folks from Darktrace for making this session possible. I'd also like to thank Kalyan and Ali for sharing in the discussion and bringing their perspectives on this very interesting topic. And at that, I would like to thank everybody for joining and bid everybody adieu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.